Closing a venture capital deal requires more than just a handshake or an exchange term sheet. Once the major terms have been negotiated, the process shifts from high-level strategy to precise legal execution. This is where intentions become enforceable contracts, and the real weight of the deal is cemented in documentation. For investors, this phase is critical. These agreements will determine how their capital is protected, how decisions are made, and how they may eventually exit the investment. The primary instruments at this stage are the investment agreement and the shareholder agreement, which together define the commercial and governance framework of the investment. Their contents may not be as headline-grabbing as a pitch or a funding announcement, but their impact is deeper and more enduring. While these documents are conceptually distinct, with the investment agreement covering the funding mechanics and the shareholder agreement covering post-investment governance, they are sometimes combined into a single contract, particularly in early-stage deals. Regardless of format, their rules remain functionally the same. One governs the entry of capital, the other governs the life of the company thereafter. The investment agreement is the contract that actually governs how the investor's money makes its way into the company and what they receive in return. It is the mechanism by which the investor acquires equity, and as such, it plays a central role in executing the legal and financial aspects of the deal. This agreement spells out exactly how much capital the investor is putting in and what type of shares they will receive. Often, this will involve preferred shares, which come with specific privileges compared to ordinary shares. The price per share is carefully calculated to reflect the valuation agreed upon in the term sheet, and this agreement ensures that the numbers line up precisely. Importantly, the investment agreement doesn't just describe the end goal, but also the path to get there. It includes what are known as conditions precedent, essentially the legal and procedural boxes that must be ticked before the deal can close. These might involve final due diligence checks, approval from the startup's board, or even regulatory clearances, depending on the jurisdiction. Founders and the company also typically make a series of warranties and representations within this document. These are formal statements affirming the accuracy of the information they've provided. For example, the company might confirm that there are no undisclosed liabilities, that all material contracts have been shared, and that its intellectual property is properly owned. If any of these warranties prove to be false, the agreement may allow for remedies such as indemnification or compensation. And finally, the investment agreement describes how and when the money will be transferred. It outlines the closing mechanics, the exchange of funds for shares, ensuring that the process is smooth, compliant, and secure for both parties. It's a transactional document at heart, but its function goes well beyond a financial transfer. It sets the legal foundation for the investor's entrance into the company, ensuring both clarity and protection before any capital changes hands. While the investment agreement governs the entry point of the investor, the shareholder agreement defines everything that happens afterward. It's the document that determines how the company is governed, how decisions are made, and how the rights and responsibilities of all shareholders, founders, investors, and even employees are balanced over time. This agreement starts by laying out the capital structure of the company in precise terms. It defines the different classes of shares, typically distinguishing between common shares, usually held by founders and team members, and preferred shares, which are held by investors. It also specifies what rights attach to each class, things like voting power, dividend rights, and liquidation preferences. And it's here, in the shareholder agreement, where the real substance of decision-making authority is spelled out. Voting rights, who gets to decide what, are a core element. Investors often negotiate enhanced rights through their preferred shares. These can include board representation, veto rights over critical business actions, or even supermajority requirements for particularly sensitive decisions such as mergers or issuing new shares. The composition and function of the board of directors are also detailed in this agreement. It defines how many seats there are, who appoints them, and what quorum is needed for decisions to be binding. It also outlines reserved matters, key decisions that require board or shareholder consent, such as raising new funds, changing the business model, or selling the company. Investors will often secure one or more board seats or the right to appoint an independent director, ensuring they have ongoing visibility and influence at the highest level of company governance. But this agreement is not only about power, it's also about protection and alignment. Clauses like drag-along rights and tag-along rights help manage exits. A drag-along provision ensures that if a majority of shareholders decide to sell the company, minority shareholders must participate in the sale. This prevents small holders from blocking a deal. Conversely, tag-along rights allow minority shareholders to participate if a large shareholder sells their stake, ensuring they are not left behind. There are also mechanisms to ensure founder commitment. It's common for investors to include restrictions on share transfers or lock-in periods that prevent founders from selling their shares or leaving the company shortly after an investment round. This ensures that key people stay motivated and engaged during the critical growth phases. At its heart, the shareholder agreement is a governance charter. It provides the roadmap for how ownership is managed, how disputes are resolved, and how the various interests within a startup are kept in balance as the business scales. When carefully drafted, it ensures that all stakeholders remain aligned, not just during times of growth, but also when challenges arise. Crafting strong, well-balanced agreements is both an art and a science, and for investors, it's a critical discipline. Legal documentation is not simply about locking in rights. It's about creating a durable structure that aligns incentives and supports the company's long-term success. Investors should always begin with experienced legal counsel. These agreements are nuanced and have lasting implications. A single overlooked clause or ambiguous term can later become the source of disputes, litigation, or loss of control during a crisis or exit. Clarity around governance is vital. Investors must ensure that they have the board presence and voting influence necessary to protect their capital, but not so much that they hinder the founders from building the business. The most effective governance structures are those that allow a startup to stay nimble while offering investors strategic oversight and confidence. Protective provisions should be crafted with care. While investors have legitimate interests in preserving their equity and influence, overly rigid or aggressive terms can backfire, deterring future investors or creating friction with the founding team. The goal is always alignment, not control for its own sake. Transparency is perhaps the most underrated principle. Agreements that clearly define who owns what, how equity evolves over time, and what happens during exits or dilution are critical to avoiding misalignment down the road. A clean, comprehensible cap table supported by transparent shareholder terms is far more valuable than one filled with complex instruments and unclear obligations. In the end, the best investor agreements are those that allow a company to grow unencumbered while ensuring that investor interests are safeguarded. It's a balancing act, and when done well, it sets the stage for both strategic freedom and financial success. The closing phase of a venture capital deal is more than just a bureaucratic step. It is the moment when the future of the investment is legally defined. The investment agreement, with its precision around funding mechanics and legal warranties, formalizes how capital enters the business. The shareholder agreement, with its blend of governance, voting rights, and shareholder protections, determines how that business will operate moving forward, who will make decisions, how equity evolves, and how stakeholders remain aligned through every phase of the company's growth. For investors, these documents are not just safeguards, they are foundations. They create a shared understanding of rights, responsibilities, and the rules of engagement. And when carefully constructed, they do more than prevent conflict. They enable trust, empower leadership, and increase the chances of long-term success. A strong closing is not just the end of a negotiation, it marks the legal beginning of a structured partnership, one where alignment, governance, and trust will be tested and refined as the company grows.